Hello there, and a huge welcome to today's episode of Gina Gardiner and Friends. And today I'm joined by Fatima Whitbread MBE. Not a stranger to the show, she's been on the show before. But whilst will share a little of her story, what we're going to do is to share with you the work that she and I are doing through Fatima's UK campaign to revolutionise the care system. So, Fatima, before we get started in the main body of our conversation, just share with people your story and how is it that the care system is something that you know a lot about?
Well, abandoned as a baby, and some would say left to die. A neighbour heard a baby crying and hadn't seen anybody coming or going in a couple of days. So she called the police, who then banged the door down, rescued the baby, which was myself. And then I was made a ward of court and spent the next 14 years of my life in children's homes. I was in hospital for somewhat 7 months recovering from malnutrition and nappy rash. But as I always say to you, I recovered from the nappy rash. And during that period of time, obviously, it's 14 years is a long time to be in children's homes and being institutionalised. And back in the 60s, it was quite different to what it is today. So children should be seen and not heard. We were a statistic, a number of 25 children in our first children's home, 14 in our second children's home. And most of the children's needs were not being met. Now, since the 14 years that I was in the care system, and now 60 years has gone by, not a lot has changed in terms of the change of what's going on in the care system for our young people and the service that it provides. So my ministry today is all about the Fatima's UK campaign, which you know very much about because you're the vice chair of that, the Fatima's UK campaign, is to bring about a summit of the harnessing the power of one voice and to try and rejuvenate the care system sector, which is broken. And we hope that in doing so, bringing together collaboration and partnerships to be able to work together to achieve that much more in improving the life outcomes for our young people, children and young people. It's all about early intervention and also throughout the care system years and beyond. So care experience as well. We've got somewhat 110,000 children that live in the care system sector. And we know that, there's a shortage of 10,000 or more foster care homes, and there will certainly be predicted now as 26 to 30,000 during the 26 year of 26. So it's not getting any better, it's getting worse. And 33% of all local authorities are now seeing a weekly increase of children coming into the care system. I think there's somewhat 130,000, young people that are struggling, in terms of, especially where it comes to housing and trying to rehouse people is really difficult. 33% of those become homeless because it's not affordable housing. It's impossible for them academically to settle themselves, to get the qualifications that one need in order to be sustainable, as working, on a path for, employment and being able to afford, to live, and I feel that it's so important that we all have the moral and ethical responsibility to do what we can in improving these children's life's outcomes and putting them on an unstoppable human path to reaching their goals. I was one of the lucky ones, Gina, as you know. I came through the care system sector and sport was my saviour. And for 14 years, I was in fear of what was going to happen to me and I'd constantly be told you'll end up in the board schools in London because leaving care leavers age then was 16. And 16, back in the 60s and 70s in London was all about marijuana and prostitution. And I was constantly being told you're going to be a junkie and end up on the streets as a prostitute. And I thought, really? Surely that's not my life's, future of what's going to happen to Fatima. But I was very lucky because I found the love of the Whitbreads through sport as somebody who, sport was my saviour. And of course, my mother and myself, mother and daughter athlete and coach ended up being Olympic champion, world record holder, breaking records all around the world. And, it was quite surreal, really. If I look back and think, if I speak to that 3-year-old girl and look back and say, would you ever have believed it? And I would have to say no. But then when every day I look in the mirror, as you know, I'll say to that 3-year-old, you did well, congratulations, let's keep going, let's do what we can to support our young future generations, that live in the care system as we speak and beyond, our years, and hoping to improve the care system so that it will serve them well.
I think it's important to say that whilst you were in care, that you often didn't have enough to eat, that you were emotionally abused, that you were sent off to live with your birth mother and was sexually abused. That ultimately, the very people who were there to protect you failed in their job to do that. And it's a sadness that so many young people end up in care through no fault of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think often there's a real stigma for young people who go into the care system, that society looks upon them as if it is their fault.
Sure.
What would you say?
It's very tough, because when I look back, I think, it was difficult times. 25 children in the first home and 14 in the second home. And it was, people that worked in the care system back then, it was just a job. Our emotional needs weren't being met. Often I find that I had been force fed, or, because emotionally we were too traumatized to process what was going on, or understand or express our emotions. And of course, eating was the last thing we want to do, but it was important to eat at times. Sometimes we were force fed, and other times there wasn't any food available, very sparse. And for going back to live with the biological mum was not ideal situation, because I remember when I was living in the first home, obviously the house matron there was very strict, very what I call perfunctional, and there was no real love in the home at all. And I remember playing in the front room, which faced the car park. And when anybody came into the car park, I'd always say, is that my mummy coming to collect me? And it was true of all children that live in the care system, that, this constant need for reassurance, and love. No different, really, I guess, for most conventional families that have children. At least they're growing up in a secure environment of which they've got, the stability, and everyday, guidance, which is something that, the love and security is what all children have the right to, a safe and happy childhood, which wasn't what we had. And I remember the house matron called to me one day and she said, Fatima, she said, be downstairs here at 9 o'clock, she said, and your biological mother tomorrow morning, she said, because your biological mother's coming to collect you and you'll move to your new children's home where your half brother and sister are. And I can remember thinking, oh, this is my home, this is my family. Why am I being moved? There were no evidence to, no visits, no cards, no birthday cards, or to indicate that there'd been anybody out there. And so for me, it was quite a scary moment, to have to wait and see what was this all about, and not being able to talk to anybody and express that to anyone was really difficult. So I personally, when I came down and sat down at the front door waiting, I was quite nervous, and also feeling a little bit unsettled because I didn't want to leave. And then I saw this pink Cerisi movement round by the front door. And as the door and matron opened the door, this very strong whiff of perfume came through. And this big birdie lady stepped into the door. And she had black curly hair, and she was talking and engaging with the matron, but never once looked across to me. But I did notice she had a gold tooth in. And then standing behind her was this very slim, linear lady with a duffel coat on with mousy colour hair. And she came in full of the joys of spring, smiling at me and making eye contact. And I thought, oh, that must be my mummy. And I think the problem was it was more desperation of I would like that to be my mummy, as somebody who was engaging and in a loving way. Most children, really need that special somebody in their life. Good role models are really important for children in the care system. It can help them, build self-esteem and confidence, and feel seen, heard, and valued, obviously, and know that somebody has got them and understands them. And in that second children's home, I had that with Auntie Ray. Auntie Ray was my bright shining star, and I called her the tickle monster because Auntie Ray was an East End Cockney lady that always had a lot to say, smiling and giggling, made us all laugh. We knew we were safe with Auntie Ray, and I used to hide under the bed covers in the morning because I knew if Auntie Ray was on duty, she would always tiggle me and get me up, and that's when I knew my day had started. Without that, it wasn't the same. And I can remember this one particular time, Gina. I ran up the top of the stairs and there was a port window, and I was watching Auntie Ray where she would clip clop up and down the road, and I thought, oh, she lives down on the end of that road there. She lives on the corner. So I ran out and gathered all these daffodil flowers and collected them all up. I must have been about 10 years old. And then I sort of had it in my mind to go to give these flowers to Auntie Ray. I'm very nervous about knocking on her door. But when she opened them, I had them behind my back. And then when she opened the door, I sort of presented the flowers and I said, will you be my mummy? And Auntie Ray then said, Fat, she said, come on, come round the back, let's talk about this. And naturally, I thought I'm probably going to be in trouble here because picking all the flowers from people's gardens, naughty girl. But then she sat me down and she gave me a cup of tea and a biscuit. And she said, Fat, she said, look, she said, I can't just be your mum. She said, because I've got to be mum to all these other children too. She said, but here's the thing, she said, I'm not always there and you are, she said. So why don't you be there, mum, when I'm not there? And this really stayed with me, and it will do for the rest of my life, Gina. It taught me two really important things. The first it taught me was that, of course, I stepped up and I started calling out any injustice and looking after the children and being mum, playing, in the girls' room, pillow fights, trampolining on the beds, and all the things that kids do, drawing matchstick men on the steamed up windows. And in doing that and giving them the love and the support they need, I got that back. So I learned in giving, you receive. And the second really important thing that taught me was to swivel the lens. In actual fact, what that taught me was that in looking out for all the other children and being their mum, stopped me being trapped in my own thoughts, which is often a place where young people imprison themselves in their heads, not being able to share and express their emotions, or the fear of wondering what's going to happen to them. Why are they there? Is it something they've done? And so this helped me, in my life, and it stayed with me forever. It will always be there. Auntie Ray no longer is with us, sadly, but she lives on within my heart, and also I hear her words all the time in my head whenever I do anything. This is another thing she used to say to me: always be your true self, Fatima. She said, you can't be being your true self. She said, your true colours will come out in the end. And it's very true,
It is.
And, I've really been very fortunate to have a good role model in Auntie Ray. And, all children that live in the care system should have a good role model, somebody they can engage with, someone they feel secure with, and protected. And it is a tribute to Auntie Ray that in October, on the 24th of October, my book, My Bright Shining Star, will be out. It's launched, and it's all about a young Fatima in the care system. It's a book that's devised to build platform of awareness for children in the care system. It's donated to Children Fatima's UK campaign for helping children's projects, and it's to enable people to see what these young people go through in the care system. And hopefully some of them may well open their hearts and their homes to giving a love and secure home to these children too. There's so much to be addressed where the care system sector is concerned, though, Gina. Apart from Fatima's UK campaign, in bringing the awareness about with the summit next year, April 23rd and 24th at the Guildhall, we also do projects for the power of sport arts and technology, which enables our young people to skill up and hopefully get the qualifications one needs to be able to further, their chances of getting work. And in doing so, helping them to become more independent. Because at 18, it's very difficult for them to sort of suddenly be cast aside, where the government say, well, that's the end of our parental responsibility. Here's £3,000. You may have a visit twice a year by this point of contact, but after that, you're on your own. Now, what conventional family do that? Think about that. How many of you would do that to your child at 18? I mean, admittedly, some kids do like to get on and probably will leave home earlier, but that's not the norm. The norm is something like 26 to 30-year-old. My son still lives at home. He's 26 and can't get rid of him. But I love having him.
I'm sure you do. We're going to go for a short break now. When we come back, I want to look at life chances initially of young people in care. So please don't go away. Welcome back. The opportunities for young people in care, we know from the statistics, are so significantly reduced compared with their peers. And the one deciding factor is not about them initially, but how capable their parents are to love, protect, and nurture them. There are very few children who go into care because of their behaviour. It is so much about whether or not they are living in a safe, loving, a caring environment, whether they're being fed enough, whether they're being looked after in the right way. Just share with us the statistics, because they are so stark in terms of the life chances of young people who go through the care system, and how, despite it not being their fault, how their opportunities become so limited.
It's a really tough one for anybody that's been in the care system to a bitter pill to swallow, because obviously most of our young people that are in the care system are, majority of them, as I said, end up homeless, because they cannot support themselves independently. Affordable housing's not there. Their education is hampered when they're, traumatized as they are when coming through the care system. 14% of, no, 27% that is, of 14-year-olds, by the time they're 14, have got mental health issues. I mean, that's staggering, that these young people, go through the care system, traumatized, triggered, and, find it very hard to process things. So school education is the last thing that's on the curriculum for them. It's survival.
Can I just interject there? Because I think it's important for our listeners and viewers to know that it's very common for young people who've gone into the care system to be moved multiple times a year.
Yeah.
Moved away from their schools, their friendships, their support groups. And just as they're settling, they get moved again and again and again.
Well, most of all our young people today, I mean, the sad thing about what happens to them is they get moved continually. Well, I believe that most local authorities need to get back to their own care homes, their own residentials, because privatisation doesn't help, nor does it help when the agents come in and local authorities throw their money and their responsibilities to these agents, charities and private companies, where basically these young people are then bunted around up to 30 to 40 times. I mean, it's staggering to think, how on earth are they going to concentrate on being able to succeed in their academic work when the curriculum it changes all the time from wherever they've been moved to? But not just that, their emotional stability, is being hampered. The fact that they can't build any proper relationships properly through being moved constantly, the lack of trust, the vulnerability. Most of our young people today that are being in the care system, under 21-year-olds, also in the prison services, are from the care system. There's about 27 to 30% of them that are getting put in prison because they're either targeted, groomed, or exploited. And for a lot of our young girls, also taken advantage of, sexually abused. And a lot of that is because they feel very vulnerable, because they trust in those that, wear the masks to say that we are good and, follow us and we can, this is a place of belonging for them. So they feel secure and they're actually in amongst others that they feel that they're earning money or they're with trustworthy people. And that's just not the case, and they're getting exploited, and we need to do more in order to help them engage properly, because the days of community events have gone, and we need to get back to building pathways to employment for these young people, building up their skills, sets of skills, so that they, they're able to stand on their feet and build, proper foundations for themselves as well. And hopeful that they will break that cycle one day. So when they actually want a family, they're able to do the best they can for their family, and history won't repeat itself. And I always say, what do you want? A fence at the top of the cliff or an ambulance at the bottom? And I think we all have that moral and ethical responsibility to try and do what we can to support these young people moving forward, because they do not have the bank of mum and dad. They don't have nans and granddads, aunts and uncles, and many of them, Christmas is approaching. It's hard to believe it's come around so quickly, but it is. Most of these young people will be sat alone on their own. They won't be celebrating like conventional families do, with mums and dads and families and sharing their love and their presence. They're isolated. They're on their own. They can't afford a dinner. It'll probably be a pot noodle. They won't be having presents to open and loved ones to share, play games and hugs, and being told that they, how much they're loved. It's very sad, Gina.
I want to just take us back, and I'm going to go through run our listeners through some statistics. So children in the UK, and I have to say throughout the Western world, things are not a lot different. If you are a child that goes through the care system in the UK, you have to leave by the time you are 18.
18.
And they are often being prepared from the age of 16 when they're doing their exams.
Mm-hmm.
Within 2 years, 30% of those young people leaving care are homeless. They're surfing, or they're on the streets. And from what we've been told by young people themselves, is that's often because they feel safer than they do in the hostels or the hotels where they're being housed through the local authorities.
Yeah, because many of those facilities that they're housing them are not, they've got addicts, people that take advantage of these young people, and, obviously not just addicts, could be, undesirables, let's say, and abusing these young children, young people. It's certainly not the right places for government to be putting our young people. I'd like to think that, we can make huge changes through the summit by bringing collaboration and partnerships together, by addressing these issues, so that, future generations beyond ours even will have a brighter, healthier, happier future. We're looking at building happier, healthier lives, better communities, and ultimately a nicer kind of life, society, because as we know, these children are our future, and early intervention is so important, because who and what they become will define what society ends up. And we do need to be able to work collaboratively, to improve their life chances, because as we speak now, as you know, Gina, there's a lot of people, some good stuff out there, but nobody really knows about it because they work in silos, so that they're not actually collaborating at all. And that is, I think, one of our biggest challenges in bringing that collaboration together, the four nations, in harnessing the power of one voice, in shared good practice and knowledge, and being able to influence the stakeholders at 760 each day that we have, in order for them to influence the decision makers as well, and changing and implementing policy, because that's the only way forward. That's the only way I can see that this is going to ever improve for our young people in the care system. Change, making that change. And where do you start? Right here and now with Fatima's UK campaign.
We're going to be talking about the summit, and indeed you've already started to introduce that. I just want to go back to some of the statistics, because before we start to look at what are the solutions, and there are many solutions that are working out there, they're just not actually comprehensive and joined up.
Mhm.
We've talked about homelessness. A third of the young people in prison, men in particularly in prison, under the age of 25, have been through the care system. And
Yes,
many of them come back into the prison system because when they go out, they've got no support.
that's correct.
3 times more young people who are in conventional homes go to university than those who've gone through the care system. And when you
Mhm.
consider how often their education is disrupted, it's not surprising that they are unable to do as well within the education system as their peers. Not their fault. If
Mhm.
you consider being moved time and time again, uprooted, into a
Mhm.
new school, trying to make friendship groups, trying to make head nor tail of what you've missed in the curriculum. Because in the UK, we talk about a national curriculum, but it doesn't mean that everybody's doing the same thing at the same time in the same
Right.
way.
Exactly. Most of all our young children today that get moved, their education is affected greatly because the curriculum is at different levels wherever they go, what part of the country. And as you've pointed out, a third of those children that live in conventional homes do much better. They've got the support of mum and dad. They circumnavigate their schooling, their friendships, and of course, their activities, of which these children in the care system have none of that. And the biggest struggle for them is to overcome their behavior and be understood with their behavioral problems through trauma. And we need a lot more trauma, understanding about how they can best be dealt with in terms of, what's the most important thing for these young people in terms of looking after them and understanding them better.
Yeah. And if you think about also longevity, we know that those people who've been through the care system don't live as long. They suffer from more mental health and physical ill health because they have been traumatized. And I
Yes.
think before we go to the next break, part of this I think we have to take on board is it is not their fault. The system, initially, that having parents who couldn't cope for whatever reason is one thing, but then the way the system deals with them, instead of managing to help them out of their trauma, and that does happen for some young people. Let's get right. There are some great foster carers, some great
Yeah.
care
Yeah.
for
Foster carers need support as well, though, Gina, as well, because
absolutely.
they need to understand, a little bit more. They need being trauma informed, because often these children are misunderstood for naughty children. I don't think the Tracy Beaker program helped either. It was way off the mark as far as, what these children go through in the care system, and, and how difficult it is for them, to be understood. It is through no fault of their own they find themselves in the care system, and it is our responsibility, I think, to try and help, to make sure that they've got a brighter future.
Absolutely. And, if you think about it, just imagine yourself being moved from pillar to post. And then when you get there, to have a stigma where you are seen as a second-class citizen, where other children. I was talking to somebody, we were at an award ceremony last week, and we were talking to someone, and she was describing how in the classroom, children had been asked to write their family tree and to talk about their favorite relative, and a lovely activity, but the lady had just been made aware of the issues around children in care, and then recognized that for that child in that class, listening to the children talk about their happy families and so on, was a real nail in the coffin in terms of their confidence, because they couldn't speak well of their experiences, and it again set them apart.
Yes.
We're going to go for a short break, but when we come back, I want us to really focus on the summits that we've got planned for April 2025. So please don't go away. Be back in just a minute. Welcome back. Fatima's UK Campaign Summit 2025. for me, and I've only been involved with you for, for a year, you've been living and breathing this.
Feels like 10, doesn't it, Gina?
In some ways it does, because it is so important and it's so huge.
Mm.
And getting to one of the things you spoke about earlier was how fragmented the whole system is.
Mm.
And I'm reminded of the song, your knee bone's connected to your thigh bone, and your thigh bone.
Yeah.
One of the problems is that none of these bones are connected. And there's some great work going on, but there's also some pretty grim stuff going on. People
Yeah.
don't talk within agencies and so on. There are so many agendas, and it's the kids that fall through the cracks. So, in essence, give us your version of what the summit's about and what we're trying to do.
Well, the summit's there because looking back over the years, I mean, from my years in the care system, not a lot has changed. And we've seen it's a call of arms. Fatima's UK campaign is a call of arms. We've seen decades go by, and each government that's come and gone promised much and delivered nothing really. And it's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction to those that work in the care system sector on the ground floor level and those that live in the care system sector. It's almost it's blotted them out. It's made them invisible. It's as if that it doesn't matter. It doesn't, nobody's really listening. And it's about time we made change and brought the difference, to making that change. And Fatima's UK campaign is all about that. It's about bringing together what fundamentally is working, and it's tried and tested. What we've done is we've obviously been out there for the last year, 2 years nearly, and working and talking with all the different stakeholders, charities, organisations, ministers. We are non-political, so that means you have to talk to all people across the parties, and make sure that everybody is on the same page, and that is by collaboration and partnership, that they will sign to a pledge to understand, to work together, because currently they're working these silos. So therefore nothing and nobody has actually come up and said this isn't working. They work in their own areas and they're not really serving the children properly, because if you're going to succeed, then you need to work collaboratively and build that, what I call a safety construct around the child, and close and plug all those holes and not to allow them to slip through the safety net. Because we see that there is some good stuff, but there's a lot of not so good stuff out there as well. Now, we can't change it overnight, but what we can do is to start by making the first step, which is launching the Fatima's UK Campaign Summit and bringing together that collaboration and partnership, so that we can, one, have shared good practice, two, share good knowledge, and three, influence, and hopefully have their young people at the crux of it to talk about their asks, about those decision makers. When making those decisions, we'll hear those voices and what it is the asks of the children are. Because currently they do whatever it is that pleases them, and often it doesn't work. And it's a well-known, within the care community, children's care system sector, that the system is broken. It's not working, even to the point where lots of those people that work within the care system sector are asking the question, should I really stay or should I go? I mean, it's true, we need to do more. We need to do more to support those that work in the local authorities on the ground floor level. We need to get more of the charities to start blending in to working better within the community that they work, in order to offer the support they need to give to the smaller charities and organisations. If one person has the key to the lock and knows that certain information and knowledge, they should certainly be sharing it with the rest of them within the community where that young person resides, because it's for the better of everybody, and for it to improve. That's the only way I can see it moving forward. is by that partnership, by that collaboration and shared good knowledge and practice. So the summit is all about bringing and harnessing the power of one voice in order to reach that much more, make, I mean, here you have the government, and then each along down the side, local governments. Trying to penetrate through those walls is impossible if you're just one small organisation. But as a conglomerate, as a group, and harnessing that power of that one voice, you're far more likely to be able to do that, implement change, at high level, at government level. And share good practice and knowledge is one thing, but also society's problems and where they can help. Society's got a big role to play, where we have our young people living in society. So we have, like we say, the probation, county lines, housing, education, health, mental health. There are so many areas that we need to address to try and improve the life outcomes, and the level of reach that we can have in terms of making sure that at each stage those young people aren't going to slip through that net, that they have got positive outcomes, and everybody that works within that care system sector can ideally improve the service of which they provide for these children as well, by sharing good practice with Scotland, Wales, Ireland, England. So you'll have ministers, you'll have children's commissioners, you'll have children's ministers, you'll have organisations and charities, you'll have the Barnardos, you'll have the Children's Society, the Children's National Children's Bureau, the YMCA, the Young Minds for Mental Health. These are really important, a part that they play, the roles that they play. It's very pivotal. And for our young people to feel safe that there's something being done, there is change coming. Well, it's an amazing, hope, a ray of hope. So I'm hoping that with the Royal Foundation, at which we've been talking to as well, that they may shine their beacon of light on us, and also the ministers will take note more about what these asks are and what these changes can do in order to, bring it up to the modern day, and start to learn to regulate and benchmark what we have and what people say they're going to do and what they should be doing, in order to improve that. I mean, it's rather like a company, really, a business, unless you actually constantly, and it's like a garden, I always say, unless you start looking after your garden, attending to it, it's not going to flourish.
No. I mean, one of the other things I think that's important to say is we can't just leave it to politicians or local authorities.
No.
A big part of our summit is that we're inviting, first of all, good practice around every element, but also getting businesses involved, because when young people leave care, unless they've got decent housing and they've got an income, then things are going to fall apart. And some really good examples of businesses engaging with young people and giving them supported employment, because very often they don't, as we've already said, we don't have mum and dad advising them.
That's
and
correct.
They're emotionally quite immature because of their experiences. But also we've got some lovely examples of where businesses involved in building houses, creating a wraparound opportunity for some youngsters. But it's small beer at the moment when you think of the numbers. And
it's got to start somewhere, though, Gina, as we recognise.
Absolutely. But what we also hope is that this becomes the model for other countries, for each state in the USA, for wherever, for them to look at things through a different prism. And the one thing that we are absolutely determined to happen is to have high aspirations for these youngsters and high aspirations for ourselves and others to serve these youngsters in a way that we do become corporate parents, loving, nurturing parents who will help these children who, through no fault of their own,
find themselves in the care system. And we do need more. If people are listening to this interview, I would love them to come forward. If you feel that you've got something to offer, a way of employment or some form of resource, Finance as well is always welcome, because every least little bit counts and making a difference to these young people's lives. We do ask you to think about this, because, you know, look, if you've got children yourself, look how much you invest in time in your own children. Children in the care system do not have that, unfortunately. They don't have that support system, that mechanism. But we can still provide that, you know, by way of public resources and also putting pathways together for employment. I work with the John Lewis Advisory Group, and Dame Sharon White, who will be at the summit talking about this issue, you know, about employmentability, is so important. You know, bridging that gap between 18 and 25-year-olds is hugely difficult for our young people today, and challenging for them to actually even sort out, you know, any form of support from the government. Even I would struggle to do that. I probably, you know, I would say most people would, but for young 18-year-olds, it's a virtual impossibility. You know, they're suffering with their trauma anyway. So stress like that, it's just overbearing for them. You know, so whereas we would normally have the support from our families, they don't have that. So, you know, it is important to skill them up, give them the pathways to employment, and obviously finding good role models along the way, somebody that's going to help circumnavigate them to where they need to be. Once they get on their feet, isn't it something that we all want? To be independent, to be loved, be validated, and to be able to look to the future and say, actually, I can have this, or I can do this. Or if you're thinking about having a family, you know, and it's just, even that alone is a rather expensive thing to do these days. You know, most young people, as they get older, they will naturally gravitate to thinking about having their own family. And it would be wonderful to think that those of us that are giving these young people life chances of changing, you know, their whole future, and building a proper foundation of, you know, a life, and breaking the old, you know, cycles of not being able to support themselves, or becoming homeless, you know, and end up as a product in you know, going back into crime, because it's, you know, again, they've been targeted or groomed, you know, ending up in the prisons. It's a wasted opportunity, in my view, Gina. You know, these young people need help, and we should be giving it to them. So if you are a company that are looking to support, come and find Fatima's UK campaign, and let's sit and talk about it, because we have an intention to bring private companies into helping skill up our young people in apprenticeships. We do it currently as we speak with the Power of Sport and Arts and Technology programs.
I'm going to stop you there, because we're going to talk about those after the break. I want to talk about the power of having an interest and having people who create great role models. So don't go away.
Yeah.
Back in a minute. Welcome back. Fatima, just before we get into some of the schemes that are existing in the UK, what did sport do for you?
Well, sport was my saviour at school, and, you know, that was the one thing that enabled me to build my self-esteem and confidence, and my respect from my peers, and it actually stopped the school teachers throwing the chalkboard at me, the rubber, because I was a bit naughty in the classroom, because I struggled with my academics. Yet I did well in the end. Having been challenged by the headmistress, would I get out the bottom class in math to get to the top? And me being me said, yes, I would. And I did. But anyway, sport really was where it was at for me, and that's where I found the love of the Whitbreads through sport. And for me, it was, you know, a chance to express myself, a sense of self-freedom, and a chance to, you know, to show others that I was good at something, you know. And it was during the actual netball match that, you know, I was team captain at most things, and this what taught me my life skills, you know, how to discipline myself, how to motivate, how to encourage others, organise the time schedules for our practices, And I can always remember, and I said to Auntie Ray, who was the mum I always wanted, I said, Auntie Ray, I said, we've got a league match, and if we win, we're going to get a medal, and I would like you to have it as the mum I always wanted. So Auntie Ray said to me, now listen here, young lady, you haven't won that event yet, she said. So you just concentrate on what you're doing. And Gina, that's quite funny, because even when in the days of my being an international athlete and competing at the Olympics and World Championships, I always remembered about keeping my focus on the game rather than thinking, where am I going to finish, which was good advice. I mean, Auntie Ray was a true role model to me and to a lot of our young children. And this is what young people do need, role models. For me, during that netball match, it was quite a tough match. I mean, it was going 11-11, 12-11, 12 all. And I was sort of raising my voice, and the whistle went, and the umpire said, young lady, I've no more cheek, she said, talking on the netball court like that. She said, keep it quiet. So I sort of looked and sort of carried on trying to, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, today, you know, we would be called motivators, but back then we were called pain in the ass. So as the game went on, 12, 13, 13 all, I started raising my voice again. And of course, the whistle went, and she said, I've told you once. She said, if I've got to tell you again, I'll be sending you off. And as I turned my back, like all kids in the care system, you're quite feisty. You're having to stand on your own feet, fight for your own rights all the time. And I kind of muttered under my voice, and their team captain said, Fats, don't, she's really strict. If you're not careful, she'll send you off. Of course, I then sort of realised perhaps this was the case. Anyway, at the end of the game, we won, yay! So Auntie Ray got her medal, and that was lovely. And then I said to my friend Alma, who lived in the children's home around the corner, I said, Alma, I said, that's the end of the netball season. I said, so let's join your local athletic club, I said, where the athletics is starting. And of course we did. We sort of walked the 5 miles. We probably pocketed the bus money and spent it on something silly like sweets. And then, of course, when we got to the track, Alma saw the sprinters and off she went. And I saw this tall, blonde, good-looking fella throwing what looked like a spear. And I thought, oh, yeah, I'll go over there. He looks interesting. And as I got to the runway, I saw a javelin on the side of the runway, and I went to pick it up and said, no, young lady, he said, you're not allowed to do that. So I sort of looked at him, and he spoke to the shot put coach, Jack Grinney, who was directly behind us. And Jack said, no, he said, come on, young lady, come over to the stand. He said, and wait for the javelin coach to come. So I was sitting in the stand, my arms folded, toe tapping, and I was thinking, where's this javelin coach then? And of course, he then said, oh, here comes the javelin coach. Well, this minnie pulled up in the car park. And as the person walked across the infield, I did a double take. It's that same woman on the netball court who threatened to throw me off. What are the chances? So, of course, when she came over to the stand, before Jack could sort of introduce me, she said, I know who you are. She said, you're Fatima. She said, well, let me tell you, young lady, any of that cheek you showed on the netball court, you won't be throwing any javelins here. And of course, I cupped my hands together and I said, oh, I promise I'll behave. And of course, with that, as the weeks went by, she kept saying, you've got a bit of talent. Why don't you ask mum and dad to come up and we can talk about getting you a javelin and some boots? And of course, I would just nod my head. And then she would ask Jack, has Fatima got a hearing problem? And then Jack would say, no, why is that? So, well, she said, I keep saying to her about mum and dad coming up and talking about getting her some kit and putting her in a competition program. Oh, he said, don't you know, she's one of the kids from the homes. Well, with that, obviously, Mrs. Whitbread the following week came up and she bought this pair of boots. She said, I've had a young lady that's retired. She said, these boots are probably 2 sizes too big, but don't worry. She said, stuff them with paper. And she said, here's a javelin. And of course, nobody ever really gives children in the care system that much. So for me, this was quite unique and I was like really excited. And I wanted to get back to show Ingrid, who was a German house student that was looking after us kids in the summer season because the house parents went on off duty. And I can remember saying to her, you know, come in the garden, Ingrid. I said, and I'll show you how I throw this javelin when I'm up at the track. And of course, it took me a couple of throws to get it down the end of the garden. And then I turned around and pulled it out the vegetable patch and discarded a potato off the end of this javelin. And I stepped forward and I said, now move out the way. I'm going to give it a really big throw this time. Of course I didn't. It went smash through the French windows. And Ingrid was standing there with her shaking with her head in her hand saying, you're going to be in trouble. And I said, oh, well, what's new? I'm always in trouble. I said, I'll tell you what, stick it with sellotape. And so we both laughed. She said, no, still notice it. And of course they did. And I got a month's ban from going out after school for any activities, which also meant that I missed my school sports, any sports that was after school. And also I used to often pop in and see Auntie Ray on the way home when she was off duty. So cups of tea and biscuits and a chat with Auntie Ray, which always kept me on the right side. I no longer had, and it was quite disappointing really to be stuck in the back garden for a month. And I just felt, overwhelmed that, I wasn't able to get to doing any of my sports. And then I got a message through from one of the girls in the opposite team. Mrs. Whitbread thinks you've bunked off with the javelin and the boots and you've sold them and you're not interested anymore. And I kind of thought, I can't let her think that. So I decided to get up about 2:00 one morning in the children's home. And I crept downstairs into the front room where there was a French bureau. And in my ignorance, I pulled out this airmail envelope and I put, Dear Mrs. Whitbread, sorry I can't come to the track, only I smashed the French windows. But one day I'd like to be the best javelin thrower in the world. And then I sort of put on the front, Mrs. Whitbread, St. Chad's School. So the next morning when I was going out the door, I hid it under my arm. And of course, when I got near to the school, I posted it through the box. And I just waited and I waited and I thought she couldn't have got it. And then all of a sudden, one evening in the garden when we were waiting, playing in the garden, I heard the phone ring and I sort of pressed my ear to the glass window and I heard the house auntie saying, no, she can't come. She's been naughty. She smashed the French windows. But Mrs. Whitbread must have been quite persistent because within a week I was back at the track throwing again. And it was amazing because she then asked me, would I like to come and visit the family and have tea with them? And I said, yeah, that would be lovely. And of course, I met the family. I met Mr. Whitbread and I met the two boys, Greg and Kirk, who were only 4 and 2. And as you imagine, I've been quite good with the kids. I could play with them and entertain them very well. And then I was asked by Mrs. Whitbread one day, she said, would you like to come up and have a couple of weeks with us, she said, during the summer holidays? And I said, well, I'm not sure about that because I started worrying then because I wouldn't see Auntie Pete, who is the very person that I always adored as a mum. And then, of course, the children who I was responsible for when Auntie Ray wasn't there. So Auntie Ray said to me, Fat, she said, look, you don't often get these opportunities. She said, you've always wanted to know what it's like to be in a family. She said, why don't you go and just have a couple of weeks and enjoy it? And of course I did. And it was great. I mean, I wasn't under any illusions. We all, there was sort of, arguments on occasions and it was just like a normal family. And of course, by the end of that 2 weeks, Greg, the 4-year-old, he said to his mum, Mum, do we have to take Fatima back to the shop? Which was quite funny. And I sort of laughed about that on the way back with Mrs. Whitbread. And then as we were approaching the home, she said, we've been thinking, she said, we wondered whether or not you might like to come and be a Whitbread and live with us. And I sort of wouldn't dare believe it because there's always children in the care system, they constantly, get let down and disappointed. And I didn't want that because I'd had a lot of disappointment, trauma, emotional, mental and physical abuse and sexual abuse in my life. And I just wasn't open to any more disappointment and letdown. So I didn't dare believe it. And then, of course, when I got into the home, the house aunties confirmed it virtually. Oh, well, you're leaving us then, she said. You've been asked to go and live with the Whitbreads. So I knew that Auntie Ray was coming on duty, and the first thing the house auntie was saying, oh, what are you going to tell Auntie Ray then? And of course, my sense of loyalty and love for Auntie Ray was was probably the best it could ever be for anybody who lives in the care system. You know, as a mum to be, as a role model that she was, in the exemplary manner that which she looked after us kids, you know. And I just felt this sense of loss and knowing what to say. But I could hear her clip clopping through the back door at the gate, and as she came through the back door, the house auntie said, "Well, go on then, tell her you're leaving us." And with that, Auntie Ray, true as Auntie Ray did, she sort of looked at me and she said, "Fatima," she said, "are you going to live with the Whitbreads?" She said, "I couldn't be happier for you." She said, "That's all you've ever wanted, to have a family of your own." She said, "And I can't give you that." She said, "But they can." She said, and that gave me permission, Gina, to let go. You know, that was the start of what was a life of being a Whitbread. You know, and you know, for me, I mean, you know, at the age of 11, I can remember, you know, thinking and always being constantly told that you'll end up on the streets as a prostitute and a junkie. Then watching Mary Peters competing at the Munich Olympics and winning gold, that was my dream, you know, to become an Olympic athlete and be a champion. And I carried that dream right the way through. And of course, when I met Mrs. Whitbread, little did I know I'd ever end up living that dream, which my mum actually said to me at the start, "You don't have to do this, you know." And she actively encouraged me not to do it. But as I said to her, you know, this was something that I wanted to do. You know, this was very much a part of who I was. You know, sport was my saviour, and I wanted to continue to do it. And, you know, we did. We ended up becoming world champion, Olympics, world record holder. It's amazing, really, achievement, considering where I came from, the care system. And that is why I believe, you know, it's so important to use my lived experience and my Olympic platform to build that awareness for young people, and what hopefully we can do to change and make change and bring about an opportunity for them to reach and fulfill their potential too. You know, and the Fatima's UK campaign is my ministry, you know, to rejuvenate the care system sector and in a way leave a legacy, you know, in hoping that, you know, future generations, you know, their future is bright, because currently it's broken, the system's broken.
That's a good place, I think, to leave our discussion. Ultimately, you can help, whether that's in your own locality. If you're interested in knowing more about the summit, go to Fatima's UK campaign website and, you know, come and join us in trying to make a huge difference. So,
Yeah.
Fatima, thank you so much. We're both very busy creating the summit, the first of many, we hope. And thank you very much for listening. And we hope that you will join in. Take care.
Thank you very much, Gina.
And thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Gina Gardiner and Friends. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.